when you think of powerful female rulers in history, who pops into your head? Maybe Elizabeth I, Catherine the Great? Well, today we're talking about one of the most powerful women, period. Someone who ruled over a quarter of the world's population for almost 50 years, China's Empress Dowager Cixi. But her story, well, it's not a simple one, not by a long shot.
For more than a century, this is the picture most people have had of Cixi. You know the story, the evil dragon lady. A villain who clawed her way to the top, spent a fortune on herself, and basically ran the entire Qing Dynasty straight into the ground through her own greed and corruption.
But here's the thing. Is that really the whole story? That's what we're going to get into. Was she actually the monster history has made her out to be? Or is there something much more complicated going on beneath that surface? To figure out who she really was, we first have to understand the legend. So what are the big accusations? What really makes up this whole dragon lady persona? The charge sheet against her is, well, it's long, and a lot of it was written by her enemies, both in China and in the West. You hear all these dark whispers of her poisoning rivals in the Forbidden City. The famous story of her stealing money meant for the Navy to build herself a ridiculous marble boat. And the big one, that she was a stubborn traditionalist who crushed any and every attempt to modernize China. It really is the perfect portrait of a power-hungry villain. So you have to wonder, how did this woman even get into a position of such incredible power? Her story is just fascinating, because she didn't start at the top. She started at pretty much the bottom of the imperial ladder. I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows you how improbable her whole life was. In 1852, she's just another face in the crowd, one of tons of concubines. But then, 4 years later, she does something no one else could. She gives birth to the emperor's one and only son. And that one thing changes everything. Boom. It catapults her right into the center of court politics. So when the emperor dies in 1861, her son, who's only 5 years old, becomes the new emperor, and she becomes co-regent. Just like that, she's effectively one of the rulers of China. And let me tell you, what a time to take the reins. Cixi didn't inherit some stable, peaceful empire. No, she inherited a dynasty that was teetering right on the edge of total collapse. Just look at the scale of what she was up against. The Taiping Rebellion, that was one of the deadliest conflicts in all of human history. We're talking tens of millions of people dead. And while that's happening, you've got Western powers just humiliating China in the Opium Wars and carving up the country for themselves with these so-called unequal treaties. The whole empire was being ripped apart from the inside and the outside. This is the world she stepped into, and it's the backdrop for every single decision she would ever make. So, this brings us to the real puzzle of her reign. Faced with this absolute nightmare scenario, did she just dig in her heels and refuse to change like the Dragon Lady legend says? Or was she, maybe, secretly pushing for reform? Okay, so let's actually look at the evidence. If she was really against all things modern, you'd expect her policies to show that, right? But when you start digging, it's not that simple. Not at all. One of the most important things that happened under her rule was something called the self-strengthening movement. Now, this wasn't some little side project. It was a massive, decades-long effort to modernize China by adopting Western tech and ideas. And here's the kicker. Cixi gave it her official, sustained support. And you can see what they were trying to do here. This wasn't just about buying a few new rifles from Europe. This was a real plan to change how the country worked. They built modern factories, they created China's first ever foreign ministry, they opened schools for engineering and international law, and for the very first time, they sent diplomats to live in Western cities. And the results? During her time in power, over 100 modern institutions were built from the ground up. We're talking arsenals, shipyards, technical schools, factories. This doesn't exactly sound like the work of someone who was fanatically against anything modern, does it? And yet, this is where it gets so complicated. This slide just lays out the contradiction perfectly. On the one hand, yeah, she backed the self-strengthening movement, but on the other hand, she threw her own nephew, the emperor, in prison for being too much of a reformer. She approved modern embassies, but then she turned around and supported the violently anti-foreign Boxer rebellion. She even outlawed foot binding, which was an unbelievably progressive move for the time. She was a reformer and a reactionary, sometimes in the very same breath. So how are we supposed to make sense of this? How can one person be all of these opposing things at once? This is really the key to getting past that simple caricature. Maybe the best way to look at Cixi isn't as a dragon lady.
or as some hidden hero either, but as a master political survivor, a pragmatist. She probably wasn't driven by some grand belief for or against modernization. It seems she was driven by one single goal: keep the Qing dynasty from collapsing and hold on to her own power within it. She used reform when she thought it would help, and she fell back on tradition and force when she thought that was the only way to keep the lid on a country that was about to boil over.
So the final question really is for you to decide. When you strip away the legend and you look at the absolute chaos she had to navigate, does that image of a simple villain still work? Or do you see something else? A complex, contradictory leader making one impossible choice after another, just trying to survive in a world that was changing way too fast for her empire to keep up. Turns out, history is rarely as simple as good guys and bad guys.